Sex education has taken many turns throughout the years in the United States. The battle between values versus science has been at the forefront of how we educate our students on sex. The main groups consist of abstinence only until marriage advocates and comprehensive sexuality education advocates. The separation of sex education from moral education and comprehensive sex education is now largely known as evidence-based education. Evidence-based education has been forced to narrow their curricula to focus primarily on information that has been shown to delay first sex and reduce pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. It seems that when it comes to sex education, it is either the moral approach or the evidence-based approach. But why not both? In Sharon Lamb's article, Just the Facts, the Separation of Sex Education from Moral Education, she proposes 8 guiding principles for the future of sex education. Her principles do not just advocate one type of approach, but a multifaceted approach. Our group concurred with the author that sex education should include a mixture of doctrines. Our campaign proposal for sex education is to provide a multifaceted sex education program through a feminist framework approach. We find it important to include many different perspectives when discussing sex education. A combination of Lamb's sexual education perspectives and a feminist framework would focus on gender-based power relations by addressing topics such as mutuality and consent, double standards, rape and rape culture, and the role of dominant institutions such as religion, media, and politics in shaping sexual attitudes, ideologies, and behaviors.
Ethics and double standards. We need a sex education that is more ethics-focused. This can include discussions on double standards and morality, justifying one's own views and understanding opposing views. This approach could help combat unequal treatment of women and girls in the United States. Utilization of literature and history. Having sex education that explores the use of sexuality within literature illuminates the idea that sex is a part of life and a part of what it means to be human. This method contextualizes sex and society in relevant and topical ways. Inclusion of all sexual identities and practices. This principle is important as it could have a very clear, broader reach. Inclusion of all sexual identities has normalizing effects and makes visible many voices often left out of sex education. Heterosexual sex education programs have often negative and gendered implications. For example, according to Lamb, when using hypothetical situations, heterosexual women are made responsible for anything that happens to them while drinking. A more inclusive approach may utilize vignettes and hypothetical situations that involve a wide variety of relationships and sexualities. Teaching pleasure. Having a sex education curriculum that teaches pleasure would be effective because of its relation to ethicality. Often, women are the sources of heterosexual pleasure for men, while their own pleasures are ignored. A curriculum that teaches pleasure would focus not only on receiving pleasure, but problematic pleasures or pleasures that interfere with the well-being of another person as well.
Human rights. Sex education should be other-focused, using a curriculum that involves the treatment and care of other people in sexual relationships. Mutuality and consent. In order to have a truly ethics-based sex education curriculum, mutuality needs to be a moral center, including lessons on empathy, trust, kindness, and the overall avoidance of exploitation and sexual violence is key. Lessons on institutions. Teaching sex from a societal perspective would reveal the institutions that shape ideologies and how they affect the sexualities of marginalized people, like women and women's sexuality. Curriculum should examine and critique various power relations. Lamb calls the media the sexual super peer and urges that critiques and the other media begin in high school sex education programs. Embrace religious difference. Many new evidence-based curriculums are anti-religion. In order for a sex education to be ethical, it needs to include religious perspectives. Instead of avoiding religions, curriculum should take an intersectional approach to consider and understand various religions' role in sexuality.